Hey everyone, welcome to the Get Your Life Together Girl podcast, the ultimate blueprint to self-love and inner peace. I'm your host, Danielle Van. As a cognitive behavioral therapist, life coach to women, meditation teacher, and author, I've spent my life studying and learning from the stories that make us human. It's my passion and goal to help you shift your mindset and create a lifelong revolution to help you reach your greatest potential. Let me ask you a question. Do you hold grudges? While the dictionary definition of grudge is simply being mad at someone for something that they did, holding a grudge is actually much deeper. It's this unequivocal anger that is beyond something healthy. Last week, we talked about what to do when someone hurts you and that processing. Today, we're taking a deep dive into what it means to hold a grudge, how it impacts you, and how to finally let it go. Let's not waste one single moment. The Get Your Life Together Girl podcast starts right now. All right, so did you answer yes to holding a grudge? And even if you're not the type who holds grudges, I hope that what we talk about today kind of sticks and you hold on to some of these pieces, because holding anything in and not processing it really locks us up in the emotional, locks us in the experience. It's sort of like having an anger that takes up residence in your mind and your heart, and it doesn't know how to leave. And that's true for any emotion. And when we have that, it truly can harm us mentally, emotionally, spiritually, even financially sometimes, because perhaps we run to Amazon and fill our carts because we don't feel very good. So let's talk about grudges. They tend to stick, but we can let them go. And that's really important. I mentioned just a second ago that last week we talked about what to do when someone hurts you. If you have not listened to that episode, please go back and listen to it, because this is sort of a building. Because if we don't do those steps, if we do not process, accept, and give ourselves a path forward, the next thing that happens often is a grudge is formed. Let's talk about what a grudge is. Let's talk about how to let it go. Let's move through these pieces, because the last thing that you need taking residence in your heart and your mind is deep-seated resentment. So what is a grudge? A grudge is a persistent feeling of ill will or resentment resulting from a past injury or insult. It is this space of feeling taken advantage of, taken for granted, being in a space that does not feel good pretty much all the time. And again, that feeling begins to take over, and you have a hard time feeling good about anything. A person who holds a grudge is much more reluctant to allow other people in their lives, and they tend to look for the negative across the board, right? Like across everything that they do and experience, they're looking for what is going to offend me, what is going to hurt me. Their negative feelings last far longer than they should, and they do everything possible to hold on and harbor that anger and bitterness and those feelings of dissatisfaction. And of course, sometimes it's not even intentional. Sometimes it just happens. And that's why I felt like it was so necessary to have this conversation. So even if you can't identify that you're holding a grudge, maybe you can identify that you have feelings that last longer than they should around an experience or a person. Or you have something that's deep-seated that you don't feel like you can process. Or there's an intensity to your emotions. Or sometimes you wish something bad's going to happen to a person who's treated you like shit or has done something to you that perhaps was intentional or not intentional. If you feel like someone or something is living rent-free in your brain and always coming up, guess what? You may be holding a grudge, or this thing This feeling becomes a part of your identity, and you begin to always feel upset or angered. A good example of that is a lot of moms have this feeling of resentment towards their families because they don't think that they are being thanked or appreciated for their contributions. And so they're always kind of on the lookout for the next thing that's going to offend them. If any of these are ringing true, you might actually be holding a grudge, which is why I said this is something we need to talk about. Holding a grudge impacts us far more than we realize, and we have to be willing to let it go. A grudge is holding on to hurt. A grudge can hold us instead of us holding our lives. Interestingly enough, in 2021, there was a study that looked at the type of person that holds a grudge, and they found that the majority of people who do have 6 common traits. Does this mean that everyone who holds a grudge has these traits? Of course not. But there were some consistency to behaviors, as there generally is. And I want to give those to you because I think it's really important. And the first one was needing validation or approval. And that makes me ask you, what does validation look like for you? What does it feel like for you? What is the definition of validation? For me, it means results. That my results are feeding me. But for some people, that validation and approval means something far greater. It's an outside source. So the number one trait of grudge holders was needing validation and approval. The second was this sense of moral superiority, right? I am better than you. Of course, that's a terrible feeling. It's a terrible way to operate, but there are a lot of people who do. So that was the second trait. The third was having difficulty letting go of things. Again, it's that rent-free experience in the heart and the mind. The next one was a tendency to sever ties with people really quickly. You pissed me off and now you're done. We all know people like that. I know I have people like that in my life. You know people like that, and maybe you are one of those people. And if so, it may be a sign that you hold on to things and you are trying to circumvent the pain, the experience, by putting a firm and hard, fast boundary in place because it rocks your safety. And yet it might be a little too quick, too soon. So if that's the case, you may be holding grudges. The next one is having firm expectations about the future that are unmoving, right? You didn't show up for me the way I needed you to, and that makes me upset. That makes me angry. And the other one is that they just tend to keep the negativity alive. Do any of these sound familiar to you, whether for you or someone else? Now let's talk about the way a grudge is formed. Often, they begin with a simple misconception, right? It's that someone is doing something and they are doing it purposefully. It's the all or nothing cognitive distortion. We've talked about cognitive distortions on the podcast before, but let's talk about what all or nothing thinking really means. It is absolute. There is no bending. I either have all of what I want or I have nothing of what I want. It's that little kid in the store throwing a fit because they want the candy and mom is saying absolutely not and the kid is saying absolutely yes. We all have moments where we think like this, and this is the piece that often will set the grudge off. You either apologize or we are done, right? Now, here's the other thing. A lot of people who identify themselves as victims in moments will hold grudges. Why? Because they don't want to take responsibility for moments. They don't want to take responsibility for the way that they are thinking or the way they are showing up. And victim mentality will get you every single time, but it is a true open door to grudges. Sometimes someone doesn't have to do very much to have a grudge put in place, right? It's really easy for a grudge to show up. because we all show up to every single moment based on the feelings that led us into that moment, into our own perception, into our own belief system, into the values in which we are engaging. We also take personal history with the person into account. So if someone has hurt you before, you're much more likely to have that firm and hard stance, and a grudge is easily formed, right? Let me put it this way. Grudges energize the negatives. Ugh, hear that again. Grudges energize the negatives. When we have that moment where we are ruminating on what we should have said, what we feel, where we're misinterpreting the moments, where we are wishing we can rewind the tape and say something different, grudges are forming because we are energizing the negative. We aren't problem solving in those moments. We're trying to offer ourselves a little bit of feeling like we showed up, right? And in that moment, we're energizing the negatives. We're keeping the thought cycle going. When we're in session, a lot of people will say, well, I know I'm overthinking. And I'm like, no, you're not. You're energizing the negatives. You're making sure that that negative feels good. Even when it doesn't feel good, you're making sure that you have it in your awareness, in your experience. You're not overthinking. You're making sure that the negatives hold you. Grudges have this measurable negative impact on your mind and your body. They're all about anger. They're all about negative. And we know that long-term and even sometimes short-term anger can really put you at risk. It can hurt your heart. It impacts your immune system. There's a bunch of other psychological conditions that come with it too. Anxiety, depression, sometimes disordered eating disorders. Thoughts that are tied to unexpressed anger really own us. It's time that we realize that we do not have to live like that. We don't need to be in stress. We don't need to be in, pain and fear and upset. And lastly, when we hold grudges that cause us emotional and physical harm, we tend to become more pessimistic. Obviously, the way to get over a grudge is through forgiveness. At least that's the first piece of it all. And let's talk about what that looks like, because forgiveness may not be right in every situation. I want to say that, because giving a blanket forgiveness for things doesn't solve the emotional distress that we often feel. And let's talk about what forgiveness isn't. What forgiveness actually is often a state of mind. A forgiving state of mind means you recognize that other people are just trying to live through their experiences, and sometimes they wrong you purposefully, and sometimes they don't. But we have to look at how we can handle the forgiveness, the calming of the experience internally. And what forgiveness does not look like is pardoning, relieving someone else of their responsibility. That is not forgiveness. Condoning, saying that their actions or behavior are okay. That is not forgiveness. Excusing, even forgetting, trying to erase it from your memory. How about even restoring the relationship and pushing something under the rug? That is also not forgiveness. It's important to realize that when we are letting go of a grudge, we have to find ways to move through the upset. And doing so is an intentional practice. The first part of all of this goes back to what we talked about last week, and it goes into that space of becoming aware of the resentment, the upset, the moment. It's possible for lingering feelings of resentment to stay without really understanding why. And the only way we get to a why is to question. Facing uncomfortable feelings, facing uncomfortable memories is how we get to the why. Questioning, pushing ourselves. Having command and control over our emotions and our well-being is how we become aware. However that looks like for you, do that. We also have to remember that it's okay to ask for our needs to be met. Asking for an apology when someone has hurt you is acceptable. It's okay. If someone then refuses to see their own wrongdoing and cannot deliver your needs, you need to be aware that it's okay to then put a boundary in place. You may come to realize that that person that you have a grudge against is simply incapable of meeting your needs and expectations. Maybe they themselves are too broken. And then maybe that can give you a sense of grace. Does that offer forgiveness? No. It's not sweeping it under the rug. It may not be engaging in a relationship again, but instead it's okay, I see you. I see who you are. You showed me who you are, and I'm going to believe you. Behavior teaches us who people are, and we must believe them. And so maybe we ask, maybe we get it, and maybe that's a resolution. Maybe we don't, and that's the resolution too. And after we ask, we've become aware, we then tune into the feelings. If you think that you're harboring resentment, ask yourself, is this how I want to feel? How do I feel when I think about this person? How do I feel when I think about this memory? If those feelings of rage or anger bubble up quickly to the surface, it's that snap. You're holding a grudge. Pay attention to that strong feeling because it's going to be a trigger in your mind. The next time someone does something, or the next time a feeling comes up that's similar to this, or another event happens, you're going to be triggered into those emotions, and you better take care of them now, because the next time it happens, they're going to own you more. You store feelings to keep yourself safe. You store memories to help you navigate patterns and experiences. If you feel enraged in a moment, can you imagine what's going to happen the next time something like that happens? Think about this. Say someone says something about you to someone else, and the rumor mill gets back to you, and you are pissed. It's a painful experience. Why is this person doing this to me? And you store it. You don't ask questions. You just hold on to it. And the next time it comes up or a similar experience happens, snap. You're in serious upset. Is that how you want to feel? Holding a grudge often involves having trouble letting go. You might have intrusive thoughts, or you may relive like we were just talking about. If you have a hard time stopping that rumination, you've developed a habit in the thought, and you have to break the cycle. What does that look like? It's often needing to practice some mindfulness and paying attention to these moments and fostering compassion, not only for yourself, but even for the moment. What can you do to help yourself feel okay and free up some emotional space? Sometimes you can ask for a better apology. Perhaps an apology has happened, but yet you still feel all of these feelings coming up. That grudge is still standing. You can ask for something better. You can say, hey, I know that you apologized, but I still have a little bit of distress happening, and I thought we could talk about it more. And instead of beating that dead horse, you can use I statements. I feel. I'm having a hard time. I need. Not you did. Not going back through every small detail of X, Y, and Z, but instead, hey, I know you apologized for X, but Y is still coming up for me. Can we talk about that piece? I've even had people imagine the person apologizing to them. Sometimes when we are in these resentment moments, in these grudges, an apology is just not possible. Whether that person is past or they're completely out of your life or the apology is just never going to happen. You can give yourself an apology, the one that you deserve, by imagining it. You can help yourself more in the relationship and let it go by giving yourself the grace and the ability to ease your own emotions. This is important. It's a healthy experience to be able to do that for yourself. You can also look at how much power you're giving to the moment and the experience. Building this emotional wall around yourself sometimes takes so much energy that you let go of your power and you hand it over to the experience. I know that you're dysregulating me, but I'm going to go ahead and give you every responsibility for how I feel. This is not healthy. You have to redirect the moment. That rumination will get you every single time. The next thing that you can do is look behind your anger. Look behind what's happening. Explore how this has impacted you emotionally, particularly by what has occurred. Not talking about the rage, not talking about all of the little nuances, but how has this changed you emotionally? And then focus on the insights. Subconsciously, consciously, what have I learned? What is happening in my emotions and in my experience because of this? Look behind the upset. In that, you can rehumanize that person. When we hold grudges against someone, whether it's justified or not, we can make them a villain. And if there is a villain in the story, there is a victim too. Victim mentality, again, like I said earlier, will get you as well. A woe is me, everyone is out to get me, chip on your shoulder, nobody loves me, life is hard mentality is not going to breed happiness. No matter how you shake a stick at it, it's just not going to help you. So instead of feeling like a victim and making someone a villain, why don't you look at the person? Do you share any elements of being a human with this person? Do you share experiences that were beyond the hurt? Can you look at them for their flawed humanness and realize that sometimes things happen and sometimes you have to know that this is a part of learning growth, of experiencing growth, of experiencing lessons that you needed in order to move forward. It's a way of fostering self-forgiveness and acceptance. Again, we look at compassion. Does that mean, again, that we're blanketly forgiving? No. It just means, how am I supporting myself? How am I going to look at this and address this critic, this pain, this inability to support myself because I'm fostering anger? From there, we begin to change our perspective. Sometimes we get so obsessed with a thought, with a grudge, that we get tunnel vision. For months or even years later, we're committed to our upset. I mean, deep in it, we're best friends, we're married, we're holding hands, right? It's time then to step out of your feelings for a moment. What can you take away? Can you remember that this one experience does not have to become every circumstance? It doesn't have to lead you. In last week's episode, I said the words, the feeling that lasts the longest drives everything. Hear it again. The feeling that lasts the longest drives everything. If the feeling behind the grudge, the anger, the upset is the light that frames every single thing, are you sure that's how you want to show up in your life? Are you sure that you want to guide yourself into that tunnel and stay there? Is that one experience worth everything? Is that one experience worth your happiness? Is it worth your joy? Is it worth your commitment to yourself? You have to remember that when you hold anger and upset because of something, you hold a behavior that will steal your peace. I hope that just hit you in the center of your chest. I am unwilling to hold a grudge and allow someone who hurt me to have my peace. I'm not okay with that. And if I'm not okay with that, then I have to change my perspective of the moment. That sucked. I'm going to be on the lookout for that again. I'm not going to make anybody else pay for it, but I am going to know that these moments happen and I don't like it. And so therefore, I'm going to change the way that I show up. You devote a little time and effort to letting go. You realize that moments that hurt you are going to happen. You realize that you have the ability to break down every moment. And it goes back to that very simple tool I have taught so many times. And it's getting down to just the facts. This happened, and then that happened. And then I did this, they did that. It never has the words I feel in it. It doesn't have I think in it. It has I know. This occurred. That occurred. Get down to just the facts. Remove the emotion for just a minute. I'm not telling you not to feel. What I'm saying is know that if you look at the facts, you can get down to something far more rational, far more less stressful, far more grounded, and say, this experience is hurting me because I'm constantly in it. And so I'm going to let it go. I'm going to look at the facts. I'm going to let the rumination and the pain and the prolonged wrongness go. My mental health, my physical health, my spiritual health, my everything deserves more. What can I do to help myself? Grudges are normal, right? It's a part of life. It's okay. But being angry when someone does something for a long period of time asks you to stay in that moment. And you deserve better than that. You deserve so much better than that. You know, forgiveness is great. It helps us in so many ways. And again, you don't always have to forgive. And I don't want this moment or someone else to put pressure on you to forgive. But what I do want you to do is to remember that I have the power to look at any moment and decide how I want to experience it. That's what this whole conversation comes down to. I have had an experience I did not like, and I am the only one who has the power to decide how I'm going to move on from it. Things happen. People hurt you. You're going to have moments that don't feel their best. The question is, how are you going to allow it to impact you? If you move through all the steps of letting go, and you move through all of these experiences and getting down to just the facts, and you consider all of these things, and you're still having a hard time letting go, if the grudge festers and grows and the lingering thoughts and feelings are there, they pop up, they derail your mood, they ruin your day, it's time to talk to somebody. Rage and disappointment and even hatred can break you. And while the feelings are uncomfortable and talking about them sometimes sucks, it's time to actually do something about it. Reach out. Reach out to me or someone you trust. Get with a licensed professional. Don't allow these thoughts to own your everyday. Because when they own your everyday, you do not have the ability to thrive, to love yourself, to grow as a human, to do all of these things, to even put as much effort in your goals and your desires. Because some part of you is spending more time handling that. Think about that. I could be doing what I want to do, but I am spending some time thinking about things that I don't actually want to think about and feeling things that I don't want to feel. If it's derailing you in any way, it's time to get help. Every time you show up to your feelings, you're showing up to yourself. And when you do that, it's an essential step into getting your life together. Thank you so much for listening to the Get Your Life Together Girl podcast. If you've enjoyed these tips for bettering your life and are seeking daily inspiration and additional tools and tips, follow me on social media if you're not, at Get Your Life Together Girl on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Clapper, YouTube, and now Threads. Or you can visit my website, getyourlifetogethergirl.com, for many great downloads, journals, merch shop, and the show notes for any of our podcast episodes. Also, please feel free to share this episode with family members or friends as it helps spread this message to those who may need it. Until next time, be kind to yourself and others.